Sure.
They're not, but I was supposed to confirm and double check. They said you didn't think so, but they said double check and confirm. I'm fine, we'll double check and confirm.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming back.
So they're like, it's Chris and, yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
it goes way back, and Maddie actually has some really good relationships with
I know,
former
right?
DJ
You were
people
married
that I
how
like
long?
was really where my rub comes in. But like,
Even
so
how long
it's
wow.
it's
Crazy,
just-
right?
I haven't seen you at the gas station Martinsville for a
No.
while.
I know. So.
Yeah, my van pool broke up,
We're
so
working on one.
I'm
did.
driving
All
myself
right,
now.
but we're double checking with Doug. He is not.
Yeah, no.
We were right before the
No.
gas went up, so I'm sure it was like, ah. shit.
Yeah, yay.
Same way, it's gotta-
Freedom.
It's a little less.
I was like,
Gas mileage.
You're like,
I'm like,
She started at, she's lost 30 pounds.
Some sort of like
But she sent me
clearinghouse
this
or like
morning.
who this
Yeah.
would
It's
say.
There's a-
Talk to
it's
Maddie
a
about
holiday
that.
on
Like,
the state gas
yeah,
taxes.
Maddie, make it happen. No.
well, like I mean, just like a.
Well, I told her, I said, hell, you keep it up,
I
you'll
guess
be here next
like,
year.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's where we like
Something like that.
so we
At
like
least
there's
you
some
should get it
centralized
to
place
forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
So-
I'm not-
where you could click like
I'm
just
with
or, like, maybe we're not sure like we're interested in like
Right, and this, it could be a
like
partnership.
passing.
Yeah, we could.
Just before we get started, as part of our SOP for live stream meetings, there's a statement they've asked us to read for everybody, so just bear with me a moment. As a courtesy, we want everyone in the room and online to be aware that this meeting is required by law to be live streamed and published online. The live stream is beginning now, and video and audio is being captured and made public. Thank you. We will start the live stream here in about 10 seconds.
You don't have too many.
Thank you,
lawyers.
David.
Thank you, David.
Right. I've got a grant guidance. You remember when I asked you, could I forward some of your stuff and copy and all that?
Yes.
It's still under review. Right, so it may be next year before. It's I'll have to change it,
Let us know
2027.
if there's anything problematic.
For about 6 months and I don't chew.
Well, you guys already got rid of a lot of the problematic things, like gifts and
All right.
stuff, but we're still doing that, so then you have to like, you gotta really track
So
it.
folks, we're live. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Good morning. And welcome to the local JRAC work group of the Justice Reinvestment Advisory Council. My name is Chris Goff. I serve as an associate justice on the Indiana Supreme Court and as chair of the Indiana State Justice Reinvestment Advisory Committee. Before we begin, I want to just take a moment to introduce and welcome some new members to the work group. I'm first going to mention Howard Sims. Howard was not able to join us this morning, but Howard joins us from DMHA, and most of the members in the room know Howard well, as he has served a number of JRAC groups and will now represent DMHA on this work group. So we look forward to working with Howard in this capacity, and wanted to take a moment to acknowledge his willingness to join. And then also, we do have present today our newest member from the Sheriff's Association, President Jeff Ballin, who is the sheriff in Porter County, Indiana. So Sheriff, as I mentioned just a moment ago, thank you so much for taking the time to drive down from Porter County and participate in person. We have a strong partnership between JRAC and Porter County, and you all are oftentimes at the front of the pack with respect to evidence-based practices. So we look forward to your participation on the work group, and thank you again for being here, sir.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Staff has indicated to me that we do have a quorum, so we will go ahead and begin the regular business of the meeting. And the first item for consideration is review of the proposed minutes from the October 3rd, 2025 work group meeting. Prior to today's meeting, staff caused a copy of those minutes to be distributed to members. If you've had an opportunity to review the proposed minutes and there are no changes or corrections to be made, I would entertain a motion to approve them.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, David. There is a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Judge Spitzer. With a motion and a second to approve the proposed minutes, is there any further discussion? Is there any opposition to approving the proposed minutes? Very well, thank you. The minutes will stand approved as presented. The next item for consideration today is an update from our technical assistance team. And we do have, of course, Chris present, who's key to our operations in terms of technical assistance, and also joining us from CEPP is Denise Simden. So good morning to both of you, and thank you for joining us. I will now turn things over first to Chris for an update with respect to our local JRAC technical assistance efforts.
All right, thank you. Well, we are finishing up with the current sort of cycle of technical assistance. They operate on the fiscal year, continue to work with CEPP for the technical assistance as requested by the counties. Before we go into sort of the conversation of what the future of that's going to look like, Denise, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you want to give an update on how the current technical assistance is going.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. CEPP is working with right now 14 different counties. We have one new county up in LaPorte County. They will be coming on board soon. We've made contact up there and they're interested in having some TA. So we'll be bringing them on board. We're also working obviously with your state team and with IOCS in a variety of capacities. The other piece is we have about 15 to 20 sites that are remaining to make some initial contact with. And so once we are able to kind of review their annual reports from last year, we will be reaching out to those remaining 15 to 20 counties. And then we will have made contact with every JRAC team in the state in terms of their interest in receiving TA. So we're pretty happy with that. And then working with IOCS in terms of some different activities perhaps in the coming contract. So thank you. It's just a pleasure working with your teams and with your state JRAC team.
All right. Well, so you're going to hear a lot of Chris Bean today, and I apologize as usual. But so this bullet point, along with the next bullet point, are really very much integral. What we have learned from even the current annual report, and I'll go into that after this. However, we have about 42 responses for the 2025 annual report. And by and large, the counties that have reported the most progress, however that's measured, are the counties that are being supported by technical assistance. And so it is absolutely something we want to continue offering to the counties. We are engaged in conversations with Denise, Richard, Justice Goff about what the future technical assistance actually looks like, though. As Denise said, there's only about 15 to 20 counties that maybe haven't taken advantage or they have expressed that they're not interested. So we want to be able to continue to work with those counties and offer them whatever level of technical assistance they're interested in. One thing going forward that I am at least interested in, and I think it's somewhat selfish because my division handles the certification of treatment courts, pretrial agencies, and court alcohol and drug programs. So we sort of span this, the spectrum of the criminal justice system. But this idea of sustainability, and that is being able to utilize current certification staff, other staff members of IOCS that interact with the counties at the local level, being able to offer a level of technical assistance that's maybe not to the extent that CEPP does, maybe not even at the ad hoc level. And so it's this sort of sustainability conversation, how we're able to continue these conversations locally, maybe even with individuals that the counties are a bit more familiar with. Every county is familiar with Jenny Bauer. Every county is familiar with Michelle Goodman. Most of our counties are familiar with a David Sexton or a Riley Summers because those individuals are going out. And there may be a bit of a comfort level with having them come in and do it. And plus, it's really just, I think, a skill building endeavor for that staff so that when they are on site, like David was in Jennings County this week, and they're hearing things and seeing things that they're able to either identify those things and start that conversation. So I have discussed the idea with Denise of what that might look like in terms of the sustainability and doing some skill building and facilitation, system mapping, some of the common things that we get requests for. through the annual report survey. I don't mean to just go on. I have a tendency to lecture. So if anybody wants to ask questions or stop me, throw out ideas. That's really the intent of this conversation is to not only say, here's what we're thinking about going forward, get your thoughts on what that looks like. If you would like to be involved with that, because, you know, Bernice is such an active partner with all of this. There will be times, most of the time, I think, that we go to counties and they say we just don't have public defenders for initial hearings. What that kind of looks like. So like the public defender involvement with this sustainability, I think is important as well. So the intent would not be for the technical assistance to only be applied to the Justice Services Division of the Indiana Office of Court Services. Another thing that we get requests about are sort of like peers, counties that want to know what other counties are doing. And we had the opportunity to go to Floyd County for a JRAC summit this past year, and it was really well attended. It was a really nice opportunity for individuals that don't normally receive training, presentations, whatever you want to call it, in the things that are covered in EBDM and learning about evidence-based practices. And so we have talked with EPP about being able to host local summits. These would be regional, ideally. It would bring together some local JRACs from the various regions around the state to come together for a day or two of like sort of a symposium where different ideas, what's going well locally, can be discussed and presented, and then hopefully give counties an opportunity to take those things back to their own communities. So with that, I guess I actually do have questions for you all. But from what you all see and understand, we have a lot, or at least a few local folks here. What do you view as the potential benefits and use of technical assistance going forward? Also, feel free to comment and say those other ideas were dumb. So.
Not to put you on the spot, Anthony or Sheriff Ballin, but you know, we stood this group up. It's been a couple of years ago, really in the wake of passage of the local JRAC statute. And for the first year or so, we were just trying to help our local partners kind of understand why this statute was requiring another meeting. But at I guess the highest level, the way I've come to think about this is we have these folks in the criminal justice system that are dangerous. Everybody knows are going to end up on track to go to prison. And that's kind of an easy call. But most communities, all communities, deal with a population of folks that are in the middle that require some supervision in order to preserve public safety. Oftentimes they need to be connected to treatment in order to mitigate the risk. And that's sort of the population of folks that JRAC is concerned about. And we've tried to prepare our various county-based systems to be as effective as they can in responding to that population, largely through our technical assistance grants. We're now at the end of this current cycle, as Chris indicated. And going forward, I think what I hear Chris saying is we want to be able to be in a position to offer that assistance through court services, really any county who asks it. It may be at a lower level than Denise has been able to afford us in some counties. But we think it's critical enough that if a county, a stakeholder, doesn't have to be the judge, right? It could be a sheriff, could be a chief probation officer, and oftentimes, hopefully it will be, could be a county commissioner that says, we'd really like you to come in and take a look at this issue that is a recurring issue. And so that in my mind has been very important, that our work needs to be driven by local need. And we have finite resources, so we can't do everything 92 different ways. But if we have our local partners who are willing to work with us, we think it's very important that we be responsive to local needs in order to preserve public safety. with a specific emphasis again on that middle population, the folks that need some supervision, but they're going to be ineligible for placement in the Department of Corrections. So Chris doesn't lecture, I do, so I apologize for that. But does you think does that sound like we're on track, or is there anything that we're missing that you think would be helpful to your communities?
Well, I mean, okay, so ironically, I just did a talk about this locally. And one thing I found is, we as at the Sheriff's Association, we talk as a group and we have very similar ideas and goals on where we want to go on these topics. But sometimes, we're on different pages as far as, and a lot of it comes down to funding and resources.
Yeah.
In Porter County, for example, we have a very robust, internal in the jail, dealing with chemical dependencies and addictions, right? And every 8 weeks, we're putting a different group through graduation, right? And so I have police social workers within the sheriff's office. I have case managers. They're working with one another. The police social workers are dealing with the people on the outside that eventually wind up inside for various reasons. So there's a communication there where now our caseworkers take over and start getting, whether it's CDA, whether other therapeutic services. And then when they're getting ready for release, then there's a soft handoff back to our social workers that will help them with placement, with housing guidance and stuff like that. But that all costs money, and we did lose funding, and we have a local partner that stepped up, North Shore Services, that are now bringing in, for our counselors that are providing. So, forgive me on my limited education on the JRAC, everything for this group. So this is kind of a learning experience for me, and I don't know if I'm way off track here on where we're talking about.
I wouldn't have picked on you for your first meeting, except you're the sheriff of Porter County, so I knew that you would be familiar with the concepts. And I think it tracks perfectly with what at least we're trying to convey is we really want you to tell us what it is that you need. And we have heard really time and again that funding is an issue. Funding is really oftentimes at crisis point. I'm grateful we had the opportunity, the Chief Justice and I did, to meet a leadership team from the Department of Corrections last month. And I think that we'll probably continue some of those discussions really to get a better handle on how we're navigating the relationship, the intersection between the county-based systems and the Department of Corrections. The other thing that, at least in my mind, I'd really like us to be able to do is to be more open with the grant funding that comes, so it's not necessarily specifically targeted with something that we might think from our perch is particularly important. I think it is important that it be evidence-based, right? I mean, it can't be going to anything, but I think that we need to be receptive to the fact that our 91 separate county-based systems are very disparately resourced and they have very different challenges. The other thing that I'd asked Denise to do in sort of a practice meeting this week is her and her partner at CEPP to consider whether or not we might want to provide some technical assistance to our state level partners outside of JRAC, to members of the General Assembly, perhaps members of some key executive branch agencies, to really help them understand why that funding is important. David always reminds me it's about 70% of a county's budget that goes to funding the justice system. It's only about 1% of the state's budget that goes to funding the justice system. So the resources are still finite, but it's really important for us to be smart about the way we spend those resources so that they're not wasted and so that they actually go to providing the interventions that we need to keep our communities safe. And that's a difficult discussion because our structure is so complex. So in my mind, some of the goal of having that presentation to our state level partners would be to help them better understand just how complex the structure is. And they're really the ones that are in the position to simplify some of those structural barriers to make sure that those resources flow more efficiently. I don't know a snappy way to say that, but that I'm very excited at the place that we're at right now, because I think that we do have good relationships with our key stakeholders. I think that we do have members of the General Assembly that are interested in this. And again, I was very appreciative of the meeting with the Department of Corrections, and they have their challenge. I learned they're about 90% capacity. So, when the end of the line resource that we all share, that's the big state funded resource, is so full, I think it becomes even more important that we look at ways to properly fund these community-based programs, because in the long run, when you do it right, it's safe and it's much cheaper. So that's kind of where I want us to go. But as Chris said, we really wanted to make sure that was tracking with our local partners and with the leadership around the table. You know your constituents. So what do y'all think? Any questions? Anthony, yeah, please.
I think the one message I hear within our organization is typically the local JRACs fall on the probation departments. We're the ones leading, and it's hard to get the other people to the table. So I hear what you're saying, Chris, but those extra resources typically already work with probation departments. And so as our organization, how do we get the public defenders, the prosecutors, the sheriffs to join in?
Yeah.
And so the work doesn't all fall on us.
No, I think that's a good question. And, I learned back in fall of 2005 just how important the chief probation officer is when I became a trial court judge in rural county. And one of the things that, as you know, as leader of your organization, Anthony, is that IOCS provides the education for our probation officers. So when we worked on the initial version of the local JRAC statute, that first draft actually had the circuit court judge or their designee being the chair of the local JRAC, because in my experience, and according to most publications from the National Center for State Courts, when you have a big local administrative initiative, it's really important for there to be strong judicial leadership. So the judge, should make sure that they say, this is an issue that's of paramount importance. And they're the person that's really kind of at the hub of the system. They can connect people, and when they call a meeting, people come. So when you have an issue like that in a particular county, what I would ask you to consider doing is reach out to me or reach out to Chris. And, I was telling Judge Spitzer, we've got a lot of folks that we could actually connect with your local judges and help them understand how important this is and how beneficial it can be to their local systems. The other thing I would tell you is, if you have an issue with a particular participant, a particular member of your local JRAC, members of the public, the membership is created by statute, and it corresponds to the membership of state JRAC. But if you had a local sheriff that was not wanting to be involved and understand, you could also call us and we could reach out to Steve Luce and say, hey, is this something that we could do? Or Sheriff Ballin could, maybe reach out to them and we could have a conversation. Because it is sometimes it's difficult for a local stakeholder to have a candid conversation with other members of their own community. But one of the reasons in Indiana why we have such robust professional organizations for our community-based or county-based justice stakeholders is so that they can reach out to their director, they can reach out to others within their organization and make sure that what they're doing tracks with best practices. Or if they have a resource issue, they can reach out to them. So that was really key to the structure of this, is that we wanted to create a formal network for the entire justice system, all of these different stakeholders that actually share responsibility for public safety when a person's not going to the Department of Corrections, to share ideas and concerns. I hope that that's responsive, but we really want to do that, Anthony.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please, Bernice, yes.
Anthony, do you feel like people that don't engage, is it because they feel like they don't know what local JRAC is, or do they just see it as a useless meeting? Do you have a sense of like why people aren't engaging?
Well, I mean, with 92 counties, I think each county is different, with ours.
Or in your experience?
With ours, I think it's both. I've heard that, the unfunded mandate taught discussion, also not bringing the right people to the table as well. You may have a sheriff that brings the assistant jail commander to the meetings. And so the decision makers aren't the ones there that can have the impact on the discussion as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, in my mind, is important with the technical assistance issue that I talked about, actually communicating with our state level stakeholders, is to help them understand that one of the things that happens if you have unwilling local participants or unwilling stakeholder groups to participate in important discussions about shared responsibility for public safety, it becomes very difficult to provide optimal public safety. And we've done about everything we can do in terms of asking voluntarily for folks to participate. And, you know, when, well, it really becomes an issue for the legislature to look at. So that's part of my thinking with respect to discussions about, you know, state level technical assistance. But I hear you. And I share your concern. But again, I would tell you, please reach out to us because, you know, I was happy to go to Floyd County for the summit, and it was a very good day. And we spent a great deal of time trying to connect folks who are reluctant in these efforts to get involved. I had a very memorable interaction with a sheriff from Southern Indiana at the Sheriff's Association conference this last couple of months ago. And I told our staff since then, I really want to make a visit down to his county to help them understand what they could probably do to plug in to get better resources. So this is something that's important to my colleagues and I. It's something that's important to our staff. And so, you know, please direct them our way.
Thank you.
Justice Goff, I've got just a couple of ideas to maybe throw out in terms of some things that I think maybe are working in the state now in terms of a vehicle for delivery of technical assistance. And so kind of the discussions made me think of a couple of things. First thing is our pretrial coordinators. And so for our pretrial, the certified pretrial agencies that we have across the state, all the coordinators are members of a coordinators group. They meet regularly. And so you have like a real diversity of, you know, sort of people that have been doing it for a long time and are kind of really employing a lot of best practices. And then you've got some people that have just started and are just getting going. And so this is a forum where people can kind of like share, you know, sort of best practices and how ideas and how they're doing things and problem solve together. And that's worked really well in terms of sort of bringing up the whole, I think, quality of our pretrial and kind of an organic bottom-up way. And then the other thing is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Project ECHO. I use Project ECHO. So ECHO, it stands for Extension for Community Healthcare Outcomes. IU has this thing, and I just kind of by chance got involved in it. They do an ECHO for various areas or programs of health. And so I got involved for their, it's called CARES, which is Communities Advancing Recovery Efforts. I'm a drug court, vet court judge, and so I was invited to be part of what's called the hub team of this Project ECHO for IU. And what it is they meet monthly, and it's a virtual meeting, and every meeting there is a didactic that's kind of a presentation of best practices, and there's a case study that's presented. It's about an hour and a half meeting, and the didactic is sort of, you know, this is something new, or this is something you should be aware of. And there's I've been on it for about 3 years at least, I think. And there's probably 50 or 60 people that are that are in the recovery system, providing, you know, sort of this work. So you get peer support specialists, you got people from community mental health, you've got, you know, people from the criminal justice system. And it's just an exchange of ideas about how can you deliver recovery in a good way locally. And then after you have the didactic and the presentations, there's discussion. The hub team is kind of the experts And, we'll provide suggestions in terms of, hey, did you know about this best practice or something like that? And it's really, I've learned a lot from it. And it's a really kind of a neat way. I don't think it's a very expensive, IU does it, but I don't think it's a very expensive way to deliver that because it's just a Zoom meeting. And then somebody who's going to coordinate the Zoom meeting and kind of set up the didactic and the case study. And it's an opportunity then, again, we've always been bottom up from local JRAC. It's sort of a bottom up thing for the people that are on the front lines to get together, talk about ideas. So the last meeting, I actually presented the didactic and it was on local JRAC. I talked about how do you engage your local JRAC and how does that help with recovery. And then there was a case study from Delaware County about a peer support specialist and how they had integrated a peer support specialist into their system, and then how they had got funding, how they use it, things like that. And so other counties then can kind of get an idea of how that works in the real world. So as I'm sitting here thinking, this might be a model for sort of delivery of TA in that way and kind of an organic way for us all to share ideas. Because I think we've got some great ideas in the state across the 92 counties, but not everybody's aware of those. The ability to share that and then to have a contact to say, hey, how did you do this? Can you give me your thoughts or your forms or things like that? Where'd you get funding? So it seems like maybe even we could engage IU in setting us up an echo for this as well. So something just to throw out, thought it's kind of cool. And it's kind of worked in the recovery area for a while. So maybe we don't reinvent the wheel.
Judge, I'd echo that. I've attended some echoes here in Marion County, and I think that model makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't have put that together, but as you explain it, I do
It's
think
pretty
it could
powerful.
be really
Yeah.
effective in the local JRAC space. It's a great suggestion.
Well, let's follow up on that. I
Yeah.
think that does make a lot of sense. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Judge
Yes,
Spencer.
sir.
I did have a question for
Please,
Chris,
Angie.
more on the sustainability pieces of it, because in the past, I know, for those of you that have been on for a minute, we've done some things, like there were things in the past where they had facilitators, we did facilitator training, different things, and I think then we have staff turnover and things happen and people kind of go away. We've talked about partnering more with people that are out in the counties, like DOC, community corrections, and going into building that capacity. And then I feel like we maybe have a change or something happens and we lose momentum. So in the sustainability plan, I was wondering, like, if you're looking at how to do that, like to make sure maybe that we have stuff in place that takes that into account, because I feel like we have so many great ideas. We used to have a coordinators group and a judges group, that used to meet regularly to talk about those things. And I agree with what Judge Spitzer said. I'm sure that's very helpful because the coordinators got a lot out of it, but they all kind of waned and just, so it's, like, how do you keep it going? I think that's what JRAC local, they get great steam, they start, we go, and then how do you maintain that momentum and continue that sustainability? And I think that's the piece that keeps it going, or it dies out. And you just end up with here's the data points of the week, the month, and then you move on. So that's, I guess what I wanted, my cautionary, what can we look at that to make sure that we have stuff in place to deal with that in the future?
I think that's a really good point. Angie's been with us for the duration, and to Anthony's point earlier about all of this falling on probation officers, I think that's fair. But one of the important things I heard Judge Spitzer say was that the pretrial administrator role that has developed has proven to be very helpful in this type of conversation, because there was somebody that was, I think, designated to really have these conversations. And, part of the technical assistance package or presentation that I kind of envision CEPP helping us make to the state would be, perhaps you'd want to navigate, perhaps you want to invest in, at least a limited number of state level navigators that could probably, come up with some multiple county circuits or districts where they could actually come in and speak DOC and speak probation and be familiar with all of these evidence-based interventions that are being rolled out by our universities. Our counties look differently, they're resourced differently, but there is really a finite menu of interventions that could be connected to each of them. And in my view, what we've needed for a while is really just sort of a group of folks that could actually come out and do some of that heavy lifting for Anthony and his colleagues to actually make sure that those people that really do have a limited number of hours in their day don't feel overly burdened, but they're actually given something that will help them do their job more effectively. And we can ensure that when we're having to ask for state level assistance, or having to place people in the Department of Corrections, the folks at the state know we mean it, right? And you're able to actually make more efficient use of their time. So that's what I have in mind, is that we would have these folks that would be sort of the go-betweens between the county and state level system in-house. We've had Brittany now as our behavioral health director, who's made some of these connections for us. I think that's been very helpful. But I think that, you know, there's a real need for more of that. So I think it's a good point, Angie.
When we talked about that one time, that was a request from the coordinators group. I remember that, saying that we needed like a regional or something, but then there wasn't funding attached and nobody had capacity. So it's just, that was like the things to consider, like that they want someone to help. And what you're saying is exactly what I heard before, that people wanted. So that makes sense.
Please, Steve.
Just a couple comments, listening to Anthony, you know, and the involvement of the ISA and, you know, being a retired sheriff and knowing how the sheriff's office is really the center of a lot of this stuff. And, you know, and I know their schedule and they're busy, but one thing I want to throw out, and I think it might be to Chris as just something to put on your schedule. We have a new sheriff's school, December 13th through the 18th. And since the last one, 4 years ago, this local JRAC was never around. So we'd love to have a presentation because they need to be involved. And the other thing I was thinking of as an association, I just talked to Jeff, is, you know, we have a lot of committees, and some of our committees within our organization don't meet very often. I would rather create a ISA Sheriff's Local JRAC committee where we're meeting on a quarterly basis. That way we can bring that information, and then to the president can bring that. So I find that a way of being a little more creative now, listening to everybody about how we can help more internally to get our stakeholders there too.
You'll have it. We'll be there. Yeah, we'll be there. And I think that's a great idea. What, you know, I had in mind that, you know, all of our professional organizations would have a similar committee and really make full use of this. And we will. I really feel pretty confident that we will. But I mean, you're right, Steve. And our judges end up being in their positions oftentimes for 20 years. Your sheriffs are term limited for 8. But as you say, in many ways, they're the most important player in the criminal justice system, because they're in charge of that big physical plan.
And we have 50% of them leaving.
That's right.
Basically. So we've got a big transition, and what a great way to put this out there for them.
Yeah. Well, we'll make something happen, but I think that would be a very helpful exercise. So we'd love to do that.
Thank you.
Please.
And some of this may lead into the report from the communications work group, but the easiest thing I think is sharing the best practices and peer sharing. So, and I think our association can do a better job of that. And as far as funding, and I know this has been a struggle sometimes with probation officers and others, whenever asked about opioid funding, I always continue to, like, the JRAC's probably your best landing spot for that, right? And so the counties who have moved in that direction, I think, are very content, very happy with how the local JRAC has administered that funding. And so it's something we can continue to push. But I do think sharing the best practices is the easiest thing to bring everybody in, because, you know, I admit for our members, they have a lot of things on their plate just like everybody does. And I would admit this probably doesn't rise to the top 3 or 4 issues of this particular local JRAC committee, although it should, because as you mentioned, so much of our funding is dedicated towards public safety. And you know, I really think this group and the court administration's efforts has really been beneficial to individuals and communities, helping us be more efficient. But again, maybe the communications work group will kind of lead into this as well, but definitely the sharing the best practices just makes it easier for everybody, I think. So.
Well, thank you for that, Dave. That's really something that everybody might not be aware of. The communications work group of JRAC has been stood up recently, had a first meeting, but thank you to all the executive directors who had your public information officer present. The idea of putting a group of PIOs together to learn to speak JRAC would be to more effectively convey a little more snappy than I can, why it's important for you in doing your job to be involved in this and to be able to leverage the resources and the relationships that can be made available. So it was a great meeting and look forward to seeing what comes of it. But and as always, David, we appreciate your ability to navigate that. You have a few more constituents than Steve does. And you know, it's kind of like Bernice's organization too. Some of us are more loosely organized than others. And so it can become challenging. And we recognize that, but that's just sort of the nature of our non-unified structure and system. Part of being effective in as a justice professional in Indiana is just understanding those structural complexities and how you can connect your clients or your constituents or your county to the resources that are out there and sometimes hard to find. Doug, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you are here in your role as executive director of the Criminal Justice Institute, and it is important to me. I know when we talk, I always typically am encouraged that we find we're generally on the same page in the way we're trying to develop and roll things out. So I would be interested, is this tracking with kind of what you think would be effective as we're speaking to our county level partners and how to connect to resources? Is there anything that you'd like to see us add or subtract in this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think as somebody who has put a lot of effort into trying to fund collaboration, it's not possible. We have, and I say fund wide scale collaboration across the state, just not possible. But the efforts that we've had have built really great networks where people have come together and are willing, sometimes having that coordinator or having somebody who's dedicated to help implement change goes a long way for those communities, especially that just don't have the resources and don't have a person who can schedule the meeting, hold people accountable for deliverables, follow up on things. That will go a long way to drive a lot of them. I like to put our collaborative efforts in buckets of thirds. You have those communities that are always going to be successful. You have those communities that just need a little bit of help. And then you have those communities that you try, you have the initial meeting and you move on, maybe at some point, and there are different communities depending on the effort who are in each of these buckets. And so a lot of it really drives at what are the local priorities, what are their capacity, what is it that they're resourced to do at this moment. And so I don't say that as a we shouldn't try, but we just should understand that we're really looking at that middle tier, and that is where we can have the most impact. And we just need to understand that there are always going to be a handful of communities that we're just going to have to say, well, we met with them and move on.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Not bad. Yeah.
But I'd like 100.
Yeah. Yep.
Good discussion. I generally then, everybody satisfied with the direction of the technical assistance package going forward? Yep. You can work with that, Doug? Yeah. Okay. I appreciate Chris in particular for everything he's done to make this as effective as it's been. And can't say enough about Denise and CEPP. And their efforts in connecting our counties to what they need and helping them understand how to be more effective in this space. So thank you both. Chris,
You want me to just go into it?
Yeah, next up is the
Just
annual
stay with me.
report, so please.
All right. So the 2025 annual report. So the survey went out in February. Really, we're due March 31st. However, I think we were a bit more vocal this year at feel free to take a little longer because we wanted to ensure that the local JRACs actually got to meet and talk through the survey. I think this survey represents the evolution of local JRACs and potentially the issues that our counties are facing. The responses thus far reflect that. So we are at about 41, 42 surveys that have been submitted. I've had a lot of counties reach out and say, we don't meet again until early May. Do you mind if we submit after that? Yes, of course. I don't mind. I answered that wrong. I do not mind. So what we have received thus far, and I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, that the reductions in funding is the number one sort of concern. The consistent message is that counties, when these types of things are cut, whether it's grant funding, whatever the cut looks like, the counties are not in a position to absorb that and to take it on and keep it going. And so instead, they cut these evidence-based practices. So multiple counties provided detailed accounts of how the cuts are unraveling staffing, in-house programming, and judicial confidence even in those community alternatives. One county actually quantified their local recidivism rate at 22% with current programming versus the statewide 36.5 without it. So there is a cost-effectiveness argument that's being made. It is for several counties flagged opioid settlement fund governance as a gap. This remains. I think last year was the first year we asked about it. It was a theme. It has remained a theme, is that folks just aren't really sure how or who controls the local opioid settlement funding. At least one county reported a complete lack of communication between agencies about how the funds are even being used. I've heard that sort of anecdotally as I've been given an opportunity to present at some of the Popeye meetings. In contrast, some counties have structured grant recommendations. So I think this is something that, like the communications work group, and we can do a better job at of laying out some of the local counties that have done a really great job of taking their opioid settlement funds and creating sort of sub-awards or sub-grants locally to fund stuff. The Senate Enrolled Act, the property tax, Senate Enrolled Act 1, property tax, I was surprised by how few counties and how are aware of this and what the potential effects on their budget are going to be. So with that, one of the things that I think is really useful for this and why I think this ties into the technical assistance, not only from CPP, but from the partners here, is if we have counties that say we have no idea what you're even talking about with Senate Enrolled Act 1. If we have folks that are willing to reach out and just kind of touch base with the local JRAC chairs that have filled this out, so that I don't know that they're going to love the news as they become aware of it, but to reach out and kind of be a resource at this level for those individuals. You don't have to answer here, but we are receiving that as a common response. Just no idea what effect they're going to have. The probation departments are caught in the middle of the funding squeeze in a very specific way. So again, with the Senate Enrolled Act 1, we've heard a lot about the cut in local funding that goes toward funding probation departments. We often hear probation user fee isn't enough to support a probation department. Some counties have already eliminated positions, so the counties that are aware of what's coming have already started to eliminate probation positions. So at least one county reduced funding and could force probation to rely on user fees at an unsustainable level. So where we would see that sometimes in the prioritization of the use of bail that's then applied to probation user fees, that works for a short term. And then after that money is already paid and used, you have the next year's worth of probation funds that are not going to be covered. I asked this year about CCBHCs. That varies quite a bit. We've had some presentations at the state level. At the last state JRAC, we actually had a CCBHC. And I don't think anybody from DMHA is here today, but counties are interested in hearing more about CCBHCs. So I will connect with DMHA to ensure that the word about those is going out. Brittany Kelly has also been very responsive to counties when they want more information. Data capacity remains a significant issue. This is something we are working at IOCS with in terms of what we actually have access to with a hopefully broad rollout of the pretrial dashboard, so that the pretrial agencies have an idea and local JRACs get an idea of how their pretrial department is functioning, but also the forthcoming long-promised problem-solving court dashboard in an effort to achieve a level of transparency that I think has been at least stated as not there. Is the forthcoming dashboard that eventually will be available to all counties with a certified local problem-solving court. PRTA is underutilized. This is something else reflected. So this is something I think with the communications work group, with our work with CEPP, but also in the idea of a local JRAC summit is connecting folks and connecting them with counties that are really doing a great job with their technical assistance. One thing I think that was interesting, again, this is only from 42 counties that have responded thus far. Several counties reported that 76 to 100% of their jail population is currently made up of pretrial defendants. So those are counties that maybe we want to work on, like reaching out about some of the pretrial initiatives and some of the things that are available for pretrial. But that is about it. Any questions about the JRAC survey?
Sheriff, did you?
I think I don't necessarily have a question about the survey. I mean, so I'll be the first to admit as you know, the president of the ISA now, you know, you kind of get thrust into this, right? And as a sheriff, a first-term sheriff, it's a big learning curve on a lot of this. So when I hear you say like, okay, and hearing the group and what the issues are, you know, where is this where sheriffs would come to bring ideas to our local stakeholders about ideas like dealing with the rollback? And, you know, I can say that I'm not the brainchild of a lot of the things that are happening in Porter County, but like our police social workers are funded from the opioid settlement money. With the budget cuts, the health department was paying for our psychoanalyst for mental health for our first responders throughout the county that might be dealing with stuff, but that isn't happening now. So we're trying to find grants somewhere with our psychoanalyst to pay for that. With the budget cuts, you know, we're putting a lot on our local partners that are not governmental with, for example, our North Shore, that if they didn't step up to continue the fight, and they found funding 100,000 plus a year to keep their counselors in our jails for their therapeutic services. So I do feel like, throughout the state, there's a lot of things that we could learn and do. And if that's already taking place, I apologize because I don't know where to go. And I think there's probably a lot of counties that could benefit from that, especially from the sheriff's perspective, and I think, Executive Director Steve is absolutely correct on where we could step up. But until that all happens, and there's other entities as well with the judges, because I've been texting with the judges on, making some phone calls on the way home. Is there a place that we can go and hear these ideas, or is this it? Just so I can share that when I get back home.
I got some thoughts, but please jump in, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the place, but like as it's you and Sheriff Luce right now. So, but there are other counties, and I suppose this gets to that peer TA, and that is connecting you with some counties that we know. The sheriff's department is showing up to the local JRAC and talking about things. I use Judge Spitzer as an example. Often, way more than I should. But he noted once that at the local JRAC, I think it was the abstracts of judgment, the sheriff happened to just kind of note to you, they're not being done fast enough. We can't get people out of the jail fast enough. So those conversations came up at the local JRAC. Those are the types of things that I'm not in the counties all the time, and so I think it's hard for us to dictate what works best for Porter County. Right. What does the sheriff's department, the needs of the sheriff's department look like? But I think without a doubt, it's transparency. Here's what it looks like for us. Like 95% of our current inmates are pretrial. Like, who does that fall to? Does the judge need to know that? Does the probation department need to know that? You all have a pretrial agency. Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of assessing and informing the judge and the prosecutor and everybody else? This person is a low risk individual. We're working. We'll provide supervision. They can get out of jail. I know I can't directly answer your question.
Okay. Yeah, because we were fortunate. I mean, we were going to lose our caseworkers that were grant funded for the last 20 years. But fortunately, and I think a lot of it's communication as well with our councils, and we were able to forecast the fact that we weren't getting that. And they said, well, they've been here, these positions have been here for 20 years. We're going to go ahead and absorb that burden, because of the grant reduction. And fortunately, we didn't lose them as employees. They took, they absorbed those into our general fund. But the other ones, as far as the therapeutic services, we're very lucky. But those are ideas that I think we could benefit from the sheriff's office to talk to our sheriffs. Like, look, we just need to. The problem is if you don't have that, and I think that's probably the sheriff that you went and visited, his county probably didn't have those private partners. That was an issue.
What I wanted to add, Sheriff, and Chris, I agree with everything that Chris said. One of the things that struck me the first time I visited your county was just what an astoundingly good job your community had done at patching together multiple funding streams in order to sustain a really high level system. And Doug put it this way: you can't force collaboration. I would put it this way: you really can't centrally plan budgets or administration when 92 different systems are doing it at the same time, if that makes sense. And so problem is when Porter County goes and does a really good job of putting these things together, some of the counties are really resource deserts. I served in one. Some of the counties, as Doug said, aren't really involved in or interested in being particularly involved, sometimes for necessary reasons. But again, the thing that's been most critical to me is that what they said, we've known this for a year now, is that this Senate Enrolled Act 1 is going to really hit our county-based systems very hard, particularly their ability to supervise effectively this middle population that can't go to the DOC. And they're going to send more people to DOC as a result, and DOC seeing that, I think, because they're 90% capacity. And so what I think really needs to happen is there needs to be a concerted effort on the part of all of our stakeholders to exert their power, to really be able to communicate to their legislators. You probably ought to, Catherine Pulley's here on my left. She had indicated probably ought to be inviting your state senators, probably ought to be inviting your state reps to these meetings on a regular basis so that you can let them know how this legislation is really going to impact them. And what I hope we get ourselves in a position to do, it is always hard by consensus, is to come up with some ideas about how to actually have more consistent state funding for these things. That's part of the thought in not making these grants so general. Maybe they shouldn't always be grants. I'm just saying. I mean, that in itself is something that's inherently not sustainable. It's just not consistent, not reliable. But what we really need to do is just have reliable funding streams that allow these folks to plan, that allow these folks to be able to reliably provide public safety. And frankly, I know the governor wants that. I know that our partners in General Assembly want that as well. It's very, very, very difficult, if not impossible, to do with our non-unified structure. And so those are the discussions that I think we need to have. That's really the purpose of this group, is to help convey that need, one, but you all will be, you've got to put it on you too, to come up with some solutions to offer our partners too. And so that's what I would offer and I think this is the way we get there. I don't know if we're done with it. Well, please.
I mean, I guess, again, it's, this is a canary in the coal mine, I think, really. I mean, and it's too bad legislators aren't here to hear this, but I mean, there's a sense where the easiest thing for me to do on a Wednesday is to send somebody to DOC for 10 years. I mean, I can have a hearing and I can sign an order and somebody goes off to DOC, is not my problem anymore. And they have to deal with them. On a Thursday, if I let them into my drug court, then I'm going to get to see them and deal with them and work through their problems for the next 18 months, and see them on a weekly basis for a while or whatever. And so that's harder work. And so what we're asking our locals to do is, I want you to continue to do harder work, but we're not going to send you as much money on it. So not only are you going to have to figure out how to do the hard work, but then you're also going to have to figure out how to fund it yourself. And so sometimes then we have to go to our councils and say, hey, state's not sending us funding for these programs anymore, so we want you to fund it. And the council looks at it and says, just send them to DOC. Yep. Why are you spinning your wheels on this thing? Just send them to DOC, get them out of our community. And, we don't have the money to spend here locally for that. And so, this is what's happening. Sorry, Liz and Angie.
No, yeah.
You got a lot of people coming your way. And a lot of communities, there's going to be a lot of communities that just say, we're done with, doing things the hard way anymore, and we don't have the funding to do it. And so, I don't know how that message gets out about being penny wise and pound foolish, but I think that's the direction we're heading.
I think that's right. And one of the things I think is also important to say is that those folks who would have otherwise gone into your drug court are typically not going to be folks who would be going to the DOC for 10 or 20 years. Therefore, it would actually solve your community's public safety problem. Yeah. They're probably going to be back from the DOC in a very short period of time, and in all likelihood, be in even more desperate circumstances.
We'll have educated them how to be great criminals at that point. So put them there.
Yeah. So that to me is what I think it's. I feel a sense of urgency that needs to be conveyed. It's not only a matter of dollars and cents, which we're all concerned about, and I know our partners are, but it actually does something to impede public safety when you do away with these programs, because they work. I mean, they're a very effective intervention, and that's something that I think we understand. I don't want to change that discussion on, there's an interest we are, but part of that, I wanted Michelle, for our next agenda item to be able to talk a little bit too about the efforts to stand up the communications work group and how that might be of some assistance in our, efforts to communicate these things. Before she does, one of the other things though I would want to talk about is, coming up with some real workable solutions. We agreed last JRAC meeting to stand up a group to look at, legislation that would actually help, our communities in reducing recidivism, implementing evidence-based practices. And, this is something to me that is very important to that. So it might be an opportunity for us to be spending some time talking about what might work if we were looking at more comprehensive, more holistic funding streams to replace some of the money that might be lost with SEA 1. And then also, how we might partner closer with those folks that are our PIOs to make sure that members of our professional organizations understand what it is we're trying to do and how they might be helpful in efforts to communicate those efforts to members of the General Assembly and other partners who really need to be parts of those conversations. Was there anything else though regarding the annual reports before we move on to Michelle?
We have plethora of resources on Senate Road Act, how it's being phased in, the delays that happened this year. I know that we're speaking at the Sheriff's Association's regional meetings, talking about the income tax changes. So I'll try to make some of that stuff available for you. And if you think it's available, if you think it's of interest that people would want to watch some of these videos and PowerPoint presentations, be happy to share it.
Yeah.
And I have to step out for a phone call. I apologize. I'll be right back in.
Thank you, David.
Justice.
Please, yeah.
I want to get back to what Sheriff brought up, just asking about approaches. And I feel like as I sit around the table, and I don't know, because I work at the state level, I'm not at these county tables, so forgive me if my comment is out of line or not on point. But I feel like at the state level, we have such great data. We have such great, I'm not saying there doesn't need to be growth, but I'm thinking of the Criminal Justice Institute annual report, right? I think we're asking local JRAC tables to solve problems and look at best practices, but I don't feel like we've made clear. I was looking at the resource page as I was sitting here, like where to go to get a picture of what your current situation is. So yes, you brought up jail, not every partner at that table knows what the jail what the population is, what the makeup is, why people are there, how they got there. So that's a data point that everybody needs to know. I think the Criminal Justice Institute report that points out DOC usage and maybe a county knowing like how many folks have we sent to DOC? Yeah. Oh crap, that seems like a lot for our population. Maybe we should, try to make some different decisions. Dave Williams sends out, is it monthly or quarterly?
Or monthly
Abstract information. So look at your county and go, this is how we are using this system. How does that comport with what we've been asked in statute to look at, and kind of putting those things together? So I don't know like how much work is being done to help the partners around the table and the counties know, start with who you are in terms of using the system, how you're using it. And then looking at, does that seem like a good outcome? Is that the outcome that's making our community safer, using our resources well? And I think that can like put the point pieces together for asking for help. Like we've got a high population of people in jail who are pretrial. What are the tools that can help us do better on that? Chris, can you point us to something? Like it just, so I'm not, that might be happening around tables. I'm just not sure.
So the data committee, we met yesterday and we are looking at trying to do almost like we call it a starter kit, like a lame word, but still of like, if you collect nothing, like maybe here's the main 5 things you might want to start with, like, and where would you get it and what would you do? So we are looking at that and trying to put something together to be able to give to counties, because I feel like that is where people don't know where to start, who has it, who has access to it, how can I get it? Can I get it? And then how to interpret it. That's a whole other thing. It could be, misinterpretation can cause you to make bad decisions. So we don't want that either. But I think there are people that are really high functioning that have done great things. So, and a lot of times you think, oh, they got this. But I mean, that's like the top tier, great counties of the world, that know how to do data and all this stuff. But there are a lot more people that are like, I don't know who to, or where to get that. And I know a lot of the restrictions that come from, well, our systems don't talk and we can't, whatever, but that's okay. Is there someone that can, who could be your repository of that could take that and do something with it, even if it's something small, like an Excel sheet and learn how to do a pivot table? You know what I mean? Like, what could we do that would maybe help get them a little bit farther along? So that's on the agenda for the data committee.
Thank you.
One of the things I wonder about, to Bernice's point, typically all of our evidence-based initiatives have been almost completely voluntary. And that's, there has to be a request by a local judge to create a program. And we have a process to stand that up so you can get consensus. But you're right, with all that data there, I wonder whether or not, probably ask something, a rhetorical question, our executive branch partners, but if you've got a county that is just particularly, my goodness, they're just overusing us by so much, whether there would be any appetite to just reach out to them and say, what's going on? Is there any way we could introduce you to this concept that might make things a little bit more better? And perhaps that would be a way to incentivize some funding. Hey, maybe that would make it easier for the DOC to fund something, these interventions that are in a place that we're actually reducing use.
Justice, I've been thinking about that conceptually for a while, but I think of it differently. It almost feels like, to what Judge Spitzer was saying, if counties can at will just, for whatever reason, send someone to DOC, not do I know there are resource limitations, but my point is it's free and it's easier to just do it. It almost feels like, it would be great at the state level if there were, county based on your population. This is an appropriate slot of folks that you can send to DOC. And if you go above that, there's a cost per head for sending people to DOC. Just so there has to be a pause on, how are we using it? Why am I sending this level 6 person to DOC? Why am I sending this level 5 person who only has a 2-year sentence to DOC? This is going to cost us. Let's stop and think. I know that's an exercise in just thinking about it, but my point is, like, if we could just make our partners think about the use of our resources, they are not endless. And we do need DOC to have space in a way that keeps their staff safe, the people who are there safe. And we are, I don't know their business, but I read about it and it's deeply concerning. And it just doesn't seem like the inputs are changing in any meaningful rate. And it seems like we're going to be regressing because of, what we learned about Send and Enrolled Act 1 and things of that nature. That was a rant.
Bernice had great points, and I'll use the legislation from the last meeting we had on 285. How maybe it might be a small number, but how it can really impact your local sheriff, the jails, litigation, wrongful death, things like that. Just because we don't have, or we're not looking at the data locally, what do we have available to solve this problem before the ultimate thing is putting them in jail? Yeah. So I think, to Bernice's point, if we can, push or encourage people to, and to Doug's point, sometimes it's just never going to happen, and that's how it is. But, at least, give it the old college try. I think,
Well, do you think, this is just thinking of all the things you guys are doing with the new tool that you have, like looking for evidence-based practices and the different things and the funding, we talk about grants versus sustainability, and just being able to portray, like, what are some of the things they have to do to get that out to the legislature? Like, these aren't just kind of, here you go, you know, fund, you know, because I think there is that concern if you give someone a bunch of money and you don't have assurances they're going to do with it what you think they should, you know, because whatever reasons that can happen. And I think maybe we look at pushing what are the steps and things taken in giving that money out to maybe show that there are assurances for trying to get some of those programs, you know, to have a better outcome than just sending everybody to DOC.
You know, one of the things I think about when we're looking at standing up programs is your point's well taken, Angie. I think about I don't have a prosecutor here, but there's always pushback about lack of discretion when you, and I think that that's well said. I would always want to be in a position to send somebody that was genuinely public safety check to the DOC, even if I was over capacity over some hypothetical limit. But what I think that could maybe get to the same point is if we were looking at these counties that were really overutilizing for whatever reason and trying to partner with them to say, you know, over time, over 20 years of doing this, we've come to find that this is a population that might be better served with this intervention. And I just from doing this for 20 years, I'm pretty sure that if you did that, you would reduce their use. And at the same time, you would save a whole, because they're not free. These are free. They cost the state money and they actually cost everybody in the state money when they do these things because we all pay for the state funded. So when somebody is refusing to use these interventions, it is very good for that local county, but it's actually, you know, it costs everybody else in the state money. And so that's what I mean. Sometimes it gets very difficult when you're just talking about conceptually, how would we look at the grant application process differently? But if we were actually in a position to fund, you know, one of these evidence-based interventions, it seems to me that there would probably be a sweet spot where you would have less placements, and then you would also have, and you'd be able to do that without compromising public safety, and you make a more effective system. So that's, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way I think about how I'd like to see sort of that process maybe shape up.
Justice. Yeah. Nicer way to approach than my idea of cutting people off. But you know, Justice, you brought up another really challenging thing that will impact locals in the system. And that is, you mentioned judicial discretion. And I think there certainly has been a lot of change around judicial discretion. Legislatively, there have been so many bills actually truncating judicial discretion from my perspective, kind of skewing to favor incarceration.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can go down a list of bills over the recent years. I mean, and curtailing on the front end when someone is arrested, certain charges and person's background, again, curtailing judicial discretion toward favoring pretrial detention. And so that's another momentum to try to have to navigate and still have, you know, good practices in place, but then also having to deal with the reality of this new kind of trend of favoring incarceration through statute.
And, you know, I think that that's true. I think that it's always, it can be very popular to do that, but it can also sometimes be very problematic to do that. Nobody that's ever had to face election as a county level judge would tell you that you know, public safety is first. You want to put somebody in if they need to be in, but this is really about resource allocation. And it's understanding that we operate with finite resources in our state justice system. And while the DOC is certainly a critical part of our system, it is not limitless. And so actually understanding that it is important for our judges to maintain public trust, to maintain responsibility, but they have to be in a position, because they are there for so long, to be able to articulate that it's a balance. It is about allocation of resources. It is about exercising professional judgment developed over years, and you know, and that's why IJA, Judge Spitzer, are always trying to be on the lookout for items that take that away, because it's so critical to the process. But these discussions, I think, are where that happens, though, right? I mean, we all become then sort of well versed in it, and our sheriffs, our county council, county commissioners, all of our partners, probation can actually go and have those conversations with folks, including our partners in the legislature, and help them understand that it's just complex, right? I mean, it's just, I'd like to go get one of those really big executive branch physicals and things like that, but I don't think I want to pay for it. So I've got executive branch executive physicals, but it's and that's sort of the same thing. Is even if it was the right thing to do to max everybody out, you just can't pay for it. So
I don't know that probably many people are aware of where they stand in terms of DOC utilization. I know the stats are out there because I've seen them, and
that's fair.
And Chris Cunningham always, we see him at least once a year. He tells us where we stand with regards to that. But I don't know how many people are sharing that data out. And so I don't know if there's a better way to do that. Those are things we should know. But I don't know, if I talk to 100 of my colleagues, I'd say, 6 of them maybe know what their DOC utilization stats are and where they stand in comparison to other counties. And that's not, again, you guys are putting the data out there. Yeah, for sure. It's available, but so.
But maybe more
messaging.
communication.
Messaging that out there. I think that may be, you've got that sort of, concept of measurement reactivity, behavioral science concept of measurement reactivity. So if you measure something, then people, respond to it. But if you don't measure it, then people don't respond to it. So just kind of messaging out that.
And that's actually been a project we've been working on the last year, was performance measures for community corrections specifically. And one of the measures that we include in the report is diversions from DOC. So how many are you serving in the community versus sending to DOC? And so we've been working closely with them, making sure that we've got QA checks in place to make sure that the data is sound. And so from that perspective, the community corrections directors are getting these quarterly reports. But again, going back to messaging, we've let them know that report is for them to do kind of what they will with it. And so we were kind of thinking that we would create some kind of baseline goals around some of the other measures within that report, but we're just not there yet.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, please, yeah.
Judge Spitzer, and we know Grant County, you guys are rock stars, but when you get the data about, Grant County's use of DOC, how do you contextualize we're good, we're overusing,
we look at it from a historical perspective. So we say, and we kind of tend to look back to 2015 when we did our justice reform here, and where have we been since 2015. So that's the way we do it, PowerPoint to our local JRAC community corrections board. So, but I don't know how much that's being done from that standpoint. And it's available to us. But we don't necessarily say, how do we stand against other counties, because people are a little bit ouchy about doing that. But I think that's kind of an important thing to know, So I always look at that. Okay, where we stand with other counties.
So Judge, what you made me think about there is when it feels like, and Angie, you're a data person, and Angie, it'd be nice to have almost like a normative scale. Of County X, here's your usage over whatever period selected, based on these factors, your population, your file case numbers, et cetera, you're in the yellow zone.
Mm-hmm.
Here are some practices maybe you could consider
Yeah.
to get you in the green. Again, as another approach to educate people to face their numbers, and then to know the tools available to help them do better.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea. I mean, you kind of engage that sort of competitive thing with people sometimes when you're looking at other counties, so, I mean, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, you do. That is true. You want to know how you stack up to your peers, because there's not very many people that do it. So I think that is very true.
Yeah. Nobody wants to say, yeah, we're number 92.
ton of interest in this for good reason, but I also think that we're in a pretty good position, I think, begin to tell that story more effectively and to help people understand in a position to make some changes why they need to be made. But I hope to follow up on some of these discussions to see what our next step is before our next meeting. So be touching base with Chris, so be after that. So if we're okay to, then I'd like to go ahead though and move on to Michelle and report out from our communications work group.
Thank you, Justice Goff. And in the interest of time, I'll keep it very brief so we can adjourn timely. Our committee was formed. We have 10 members from different agencies being represented. CEPP has Denise also helping us as a part of TA. So we are very appreciative of her time and her expertise. Justice Goff also joined us for our first meeting. Our first meeting was held on March 17th. It was more of an informational, organizational type meeting and structure. A lot of the folks who joined us from your agencies, some of them knew a lot about JRAC because they've been involved in different aspects of things, but some of them didn't know a whole lot. So I appreciate the sentiments shared earlier about learning curves and those things. And so I think the advantage that our committee has, because we have folks who don't know a lot, it'll help us in assessing our communications that we currently have, our website, what resources are currently there, finding opportunities to make improvements and suggestions, and leveraging their expertise on how to learn and communicate to folks who have a lesser understanding of what we're doing versus those who have more background and information. So I think the mix of the group and their knowledge levels could be very helpful to this group. Our group is targeting part of the JRAC strategic plan, which is the multi-dimensional communication strategy. Not just looking at the website and the resources there, but looking at opportunities to share successes and share wins that the locals are engaging in, looking at the annual reports and the TA requests to see what types of opportunities would we be able to leverage and provide back out, as well as looking at sustainability, member orientation, those types of things to get people up to speed faster, get them engaged more quickly so that way we lose less momentum as things turn over. So after our orientation of where materials we're currently at, Denise did a great job reviewing the strategic plan elements with the group, but we gave them action items to please review those resources and find what are we doing well, what are things that could be improved, what are suggestions they can see, what are gaps they identify, so we can catalog all of that information and try to organize it into a couple of buckets so that way we can then use the committee members to try to start working on those things along with CEPP's help. I think the discussion we've had here today is very illustrative of some of the things that we need to continue to hear from this group and others. So to the degree that you have other information that you couldn't share today due to time or whatever, please feel free to email me. If you don't have my contact information, any of the staff can get you in touch with me. But I'm happy to catalog those ideas, suggestions, struggles, so we can be as complete as we can and try to prioritize where we can reach out. Some of the communication strategies won't just be website. We'll have to talk about what are things that we email out to local JRAC chairs and points of contact. What are things we put on the website? What are things we're going to also ask professional associations to communicate out to their membership more broadly? So looking at all those types of layering around how to get information out and considering when those things should be used and when they shouldn't. I know the new orientation opportunities have been talked about in the past for everyone just to learn basic information and how to connect locally, and then what the state's doing as well. So those opportunities are very helpful. Our next meeting actually is Monday afternoon. So we'll be hopefully hearing back from members of the committee on their thoughts so far. And then we are going to meet every other month thereafter. So that's our schedule at this point, Justice Goff. I'll take any questions or suggestions.
Any questions for Michelle? Well, thank you as always to Michelle. I don't know how many times we meet this week, Michelle, but I appreciate you keeping all of us on top of everything. And if you get a chance, well, first, thank you for allowing your PIOs to be part of that. It's a lift, but please convey our appreciation to them as well, because we think it's really important. Denise, is there anything that you'd like to add for the good of the order before we adjourn? I so appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you for letting me be here, because every time I participate, I think I come away with just new information and some new ideas. And for sure, I'll be in contact with Michelle and Chris because this conversation today, I think, has generated some takeaways to take back to the existing work groups that you have, particularly the data and communication work group. So just very appreciative for being here.
We appreciate you. Is there any other business to bring before the work group? Hearing none, we will stand adjourned. For your benefit, our next meeting will be held on June 12th, 2026, same time, 9:30 a.m. Eastern, same location. Thank you all for being here. We'll stand adjourned.